Hello, I'm Locke Meredith, and I'd like to invite you to join me on the next Legal Lines. We're very pleased to have on the show Judge Duke Welch. He's a judge on the First Circuit Court of Appeal, and the judge is running for the Louisiana Supreme Court. Judge Welch is going to talk to us about the criteria that the Supreme Court looks at to decide whether or not it wants to listen to a case. He's also going to talk about the very important power that the Louisiana Supreme Court has. So join us on the next Legal Lines with First Circuit Court of Appeal Judge Duke Welch. Hello, I'm Locke Meredith, and I'd like to thank you on behalf of myself, Sean Fagan, and Corey Ogeron, and our entire staff for letting us come into your homes for the last 10 years via Legal Lines. We hope that you've come to a greater understanding of how the law works and how the government works for you. So from all of us, thank you. Hello, welcome to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith, and I'm very pleased to have on the show today a judge on the First Circuit Court of Appeal, Duke Welch. Duke, thank you so much for coming in and doing the show. We appreciate it.
It's always my pleasure.
Well, thank you. You're running for the Louisiana Supreme Court. There's a lot of folks that are running. Tell the folks why.
Well, the Supreme Court, Locke, as you know, is one of the most important jobs in the state.
Truly.
Not only do the justices determine what law and policy goes into the law, but the Supreme Court completely controls the practice of law and the judicial system, the third branch of government, for the entire state.
Right, Duke. I don't think most people understand how powerful, I mean, they are, you know, we've talked about this before, but how the founders divided up power between the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary. And we're talking about the court that's at the top of that judiciary pyramid.
Exactly true. And the court has entire control over the third branch of government. And it is an awesome responsibility. They do that on 0.5% of the budget.
It's crazy. Chief Justice Kitty Kimball, you know, once a year goes up and has to basically confirm what the money's needed. And she was telling me that very figure, and it baffles the mind that an entire branch of government is run on 1% of the entire state budget.
That's correct, and it controls the actions of judges, actions of lawyers, decides cases, hears some appeals of right, but mostly decides what cases will be heard and what they won't hear.
And I don't think folks understand the administrative role that the Chief Justice in particular, but the Supreme Court plays, because it's a business. If you think of it as a business, it's like a business where you have almost 600 judges, thousands of employees. You have one Supreme Court, 5 appellate courts, 42 trial courts, and then well over 50 other city courts. It's a huge monolith.
It really is. And what is probably going to be surprising to many of the people listening, about half of the docket is hearing attorney and judicial ethics issues that come before the court.
Sad. And you know, it's interesting, the Supreme Court, unlike the appellate court that you're currently on at the First Circuit, they pretty much can decide whether or not they want to hear a case. But those things, that is one of the 2 circumstances: disciplinary actions over judges and attorneys, and then murder or death cases.
Exactly. Where a defendant is convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death by the jury, that appeal goes directly of right to the Louisiana Supreme Court. So it doesn't even come to the Court of Appeal, which I sit on currently.
Right. They kind of jump over you guys.
And one other instance is where a district court judge declares an act of the legislature unconstitutional. That is an appeal of right directly to the Supreme Court. But only in those instances do the Supreme Court justices have to hear a case. The rest of the decisions they hear are based upon a criteria that they have set forth, and they decide what cases they want to hear.
And I want to talk about that level of discretion, but before we do, let's talk about, because you know, I said in the beginning, there's a lot of folks running for this position. That the Chief Justice, she's retiring January 1 of 13. She's done a fantastic job. I mean, a trailblazer. First Lady Judge, I think, First Lady Justice, and then First Lady Chief Justice. And we, of course, all wish her the best. But tell the folks about yourself, because you really have been on the very front lines as a prosecutor all the way up to where you are now.
Locke, I can tell you, I went to law school and graduated from LSU, and with the sole idea I wanted to go into law to help people. I got out of the Air Force. I went and volunteered for the United States Air Force during Vietnam.
So you're willing to put your life on the line?
I did put my life on the line and was ready to defend our Constitution and our way of life and with myself and sacrifice that for what I believe in. And after doing that and understanding that public service to me is the greatest joy a person can have is to help others, I went into law because I wanted to use that as a vehicle to help people. I saw my first opportunity the day I graduated from LSU Law School. I got elected to the Baker City Council.
Oh, man.
And I have served in elective office. The people have trusted me with their lives and their problems and their issues in elective office for going on 32 years.
It's a long time.
I think it's the longest, it's close, if not the longest public serving elected official in East Baton Rouge Parish.
Is that right?
That's
Well, I
correct.
think we were talking before, all that started happening in the Ronald Reagan days.
When Ronald Reagan got elected in January, I got elected in July.
So good company.
Absolutely good company. And after 2 terms, he stopped and I kept going.
Let's talk about the fact that you were a prosecutor.
You know,
and tell the folks why that matters.
As a prosecutor, you have to understand that people, there are faces and victims of crime. And somebody's got to stand in the gap and say, you can't do this, and if you do, you're going to have to pay a penalty for it. And so people have to step forth and do that. And I was willing to do that. I also worked with the Attorney General's office in consumer protection, protecting citizens from overbearing and unscrupulous business practices by some businesses. So I've worked in both of those roles in order to help people.
And then, and how long were you in the prosecutor position?
I was a prosecutor from 1986 to 1984 to 1994 when I became a judge in 1995.
And
for the last 18 years, I've been a judge.
right, and that's and again on the front lines as a judge. First a trial court judge for how long here in East Baton Rouge Parish?
In East Baton Rouge Parish, I was a trial court judge for 10 years. The first 2 years, I heard everything from traffic tickets to a death penalty case, where the individual was sentenced to death.
So on the other side of the bench, so to speak.
So on the other, exactly. And then on the latter part of that 10-year term, I did complex civil litigation and of every type. So I have as a trial judge, I have a well-rounded background in that.
Because I think folks need to understand that when they hear about the law is really chopped kind of in two ways. You have the civil litigation, which is dealing with car wrecks or contracts or anything like that, and then you have the criminal component, and you have served as a judge, well, a prosecutor and a judge in the criminal side of the law, and then as a judge and I guess practicing also as an attorney in the civil component.
That's correct, absolutely. And I've done, as a trial judge and as an attorney, many jury trials and worked with people and help them resolve conflicts inside the criminal justice and civil justice system as well as outside.
Right.
I had a thing I needed to do though. In order, the U.S. Supreme Court says in death penalty cases, death is different in about 50 opinions. So you have to know the rules and regulations. And if you get it wrong as a trial judge, or if you don't catch it at the Supreme Court level, then after 15 years, it comes back and the U.S. Supreme Court kicks it out. So you have to be very careful. So I actually got a degree in judicial studies in order, and part of that was to study the ramifications and implications and minutiae about death penalty cases.
All right, let's continue this on the next segment. This is Locke Meredith with Legal Lines. Judge Duke Welch will be right back. Hello, I'm Locke Meredith, and I'd like to thank you on behalf of myself, Sean Fagan, and Corey Ogeron, and our entire staff for letting us come into your homes for the last 10 years via Legal Lines. We hope that you've come to a greater understanding of how the law works and how the government works for you. So from all of us, thank you. Welcome back to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith, and we're very pleased to have on the show today Judge Duke Welch. He is a judge on the First Circuit Court of Appeal. Judge, let's dive right back in. You were talking about the fact that, as a prosecutor, you saw live human beings. You knew that there was a consequence to the crime. As a trial court judge, you really see a face there too, don't you?
You absolutely do, and your job as a trial court judge is to find justice with the circumstances that are brought before you in an individual case. And you're in charge when you're a trial court judge. In other words, you control the courtroom and you make the decisions and you help give the law to the jury and let them make decisions. And at the end of the day, you get a decision.
And if it's a bench trial, you're literally watching, listening to the witnesses and the parties involved in the litigation, and you're deciding whether or not you believe them.
And done it many, many hundreds of times in those circumstances.
And it's different when you're on an appellate court. Explain why.
Here's why, Locke. Number one, on an appellate court level, you don't get to see anybody except the attorneys. There's no witnesses, no testimony. And guess what? You're no longer an individual. You sit in at least a panel of 3, sometimes 5, and sometimes 12. So you have to understand that you have to read a record and be able to cut through that. You have to make sure that you understand that there are lives and fortunes and freedoms hanging on decisions that you make. And it's not just a cold record or statistic. There's something that's happened that you've got to make sure that justice prevails in.
It's interesting, Judge. I've never really thought about it, but the whole reason that we have more than just one judge deciding an appeal is because it is very important, because the decisions you make in one case can affect the outcome at the trial court level on hundreds or thousands of cases.
Exactly right. And that's such a good distinction, because as a district court judge or a trial judge, you're finding justice in that. When you write an opinion for an appellate court, that not only affects that case, but every similarly situated case has to be dealt with that way to have consistency under the law.
For the folks to understand, we have 5 appellate courts.
Correct.
And you're on the First Circuit. You're on the circuit that deals with East Baton Rouge Parish, which is the largest population. We have the seat of government here. There's a lot of activity that takes place. A lot of money changes hands because of the petrochemical companies and all that. Y'all have dealt with about near every issue that can be contemplated on the First Circuit.
Absolutely true. We have 16 parishes, all the way from Lafourche down on the coast, where we deal with all kind of maritime, admiralty type cases, and those come all the way up to Washington, rural Washington Parish. So St. Tammany, some of the fastest growing corridor in the state, is in the First Circuit District. So we've had an explosion of litigation, an explosion of court time and effort spent in order to keep up, and we managed to do that.
Judge, it's interesting. When you were a trial judge, you made a decision. You affected the parties that were to that lawsuit, and then you've indicated at the appellate court level, you're affecting not only the parties to that particular suit, but there are trial courts that fall underneath the First Circuit umbrella. And you affected scores of courts, trial courts. At the Supreme Court level, your decisions affect every single trial court, all 5 of the appellate courts, and every single trial court underneath them. It's a huge umbrella.
It's a huge umbrella. You're so right about that, Locke. It affects every case in the state when you're on the Supreme Court. What's interesting too is that in order to get your opinion, if you think you're right about something, you've got to, and you're the writing judge, you have to convince your colleagues, sometimes 1 and sometimes 2 if it's a 3-person panel, that you're correct.
Got a little inside game going on here. You've been there.
Well, it's like back on the city council. you've got to have, you just don't make the individual decision. You've got to get a consensus. And so you've got to convince somebody or some people that you're right.
And so the internal workings, it's interesting because I've never sat in that role. I have no concept of it, but you have. And of course, the Supreme Court is higher than the Appellate Court, the First Circuit Appellate Court. But what you're telling me is you have to have a wide background and foundation of experience in decision making to be able to effectively communicate with your co-justices.
Exactly. You have to really understand the law. You have to understand the facts. You have to understand people. And you have to be able to go through a stack sometimes as big as half this room of documents and things that have been presented to make sure that you don't make a mistake and that you're right.
Judge, I think it's interesting too because not everybody has done what you have done, and that is continue your education so that you do this job right, correctly, and well.
Well, thank you for mentioning that because you're right. I felt like it was very important when I did death penalty cases and to be a better judge to get a master's of judicial studies from the University of Nevada that was in conjunction with the National Judicial College. What I've done after that, though, is that sometimes it really takes listening and understanding understanding of how other people work. So I'm getting a Master of Law degree in alternative dispute resolution.
Which is a big deal.
Well, from Pepperdine University where I was accepted, and they're the #1 school for that in the country.
Really?
They're better than Harvard, Yale. They're the #1 program in the country, but I'm getting my Master of Law degree there because I think mediation and helping people work things out will speed up time, cost less money.
I mean, Judge, that was a question I was going to ask you because, as we mentioned, one of the roles of the Louisiana Supreme Court is the administration of the process and the proceedings below it, at the appellate court and the trial court level. And as you know very well, it's extraordinarily expensive to litigate, and it takes forever for most things to be resolved. And you already know that.
20 states already have mediation in their courts, and I've designed a program already for the courts of appeal. I'm going to expand that to district courts because you can do things in mediation, and sometimes it might just be an apology, sometimes it might be an explanation, sometimes it might be changing things that if I were sitting as a trial judge, I couldn't order. But sometimes letting people help resolve their own problems if they're given the opportunity to makes for a much more just.
Interesting. It facilitates communication between the parties who are really at issue.
Or have the conflict.
Interesting.
Yes.
And so obviously if elected to the Louisiana Supreme Court, that would be something that you I guess, devote a lot of energy and effort to.
I am going to devote a great deal of time to that because we have a great system of justice.
We do.
But it takes too long.
It does.
It costs too much.
It does.
And sometimes the result is not as certain as you'd want to see. And I want to make that better.
Well, let's continue this on the next segment. This is Locke Meredith, Legal Lines. First Circuit Court of Appeal Judge Duke Welch will be right back. Hello, I'm Locke Meredith, and I'd like to thank you on behalf of myself, Sean Fagan, and Corey Ogeron, and our entire staff for letting us come into your homes for the last 10 years via Legal Lines. We hope that you've come to a greater understanding of how the law works and how the government works for you. So from all of us, thank you. Welcome back to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith, and we have a gentleman running for the Louisiana Supreme Court. He is on the First Circuit Court of Appeal, Judge Duke Welch. Duke, let's dive back in. You were talking about the fact that there's sometimes a better way to resolve conflict than the courts because it is extraordinarily expensive, takes forever, and you've also, in addition to getting education in that field, you've kind of been out in the public in the sense of pouring your life out in public service and such. Discuss with the folks kind of the awards and recognition that you've gotten in that regard, because you've been a leader for a long time.
I've been going here for about 32 years, Locke, and I've loved every second of it. Some things that I'm really proud about. You know, I don't like to talk about myself very much, but
well, you're a vet of Vietnam, no less. So.
Yes, but in any event, I'm very proud of the fact that I was president of the Dean Henry George McMahon Inns of Court here in Baton Rouge.
Tell the folks what that does.
That's an organization that teaches ethics and professionalism.
To young lawyers?
Yes. To
well,
lawyers,
anybody, huh?
judges, lawyers, anybody who wants to come. And we have about 80 members. And let me tell you this, our inn, over the 2 years I was there, was selected as one of the top inns in the nation. Was invited, got to go to the U.S. Supreme Court,
really?
Accept the award on behalf of Baton Rouge, and I was very, very proud, and met with Justice Thomas there of the Supreme Court, and who was very complimentary and nice, and just a wonderful feeling to have Louisiana at the forefront of ethics and professionalism.
Yep.
I've been working closely over the last with the last three presidents on the professionalism committee of the State Bar Association that I'm a member of, and I'm proud to be on that. And we have a very interesting program coming out for young lawyers where we're going to recommend to the Judicial Council that young lawyers that are not affiliated or associated with a firm be paired with a mentor, someone who can guide them and direct them and give them forms and teach them what they don't learn in law school. And all of us know what you don't learn in law school. And so I just think that'll be
it's absolutely
tremendous
necessary
step forward to have young people have someone paired with someone that's willing, able to guide and talk to and mentor them. I think that'll be a wonderful occasion when that gets through.
Well, Judge, you mentioned it. The Louisiana Supreme Court has to deal with the disciplinary proceedings for judges and attorneys, and one of the ways to address this before that has to happen is to educate people.
Exactly. I've been privileged to be nominated by my fellow judges, and I've been on the State Judicial Ethics Commission for the last 6 years. And I've been nominated by my fellow judges. And in 2010, I was nominated and inducted into the Louisiana Justice Hall of Fame.
Well, congratulations. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations. Well, let's shift gears, because if you're elected to the Louisiana Supreme Court, there's primarily 5 criteria that they use to decide whether or not they want to even listen to an appeal. They don't have to typically. And there's 5 things that they look at in a writ that may come up, a request to come up for them to consider an appeal. The first one is being that there's a conflict between one of the, or 2 or 3 of the 5 appellate courts below them. Explain to the folks what that is.
Well, we have that all the time. As you indicated, there are 5 appellate courts in Louisiana, and they're geographically separated. So the Third Circuit over in the Lake Charles area, the Second Circuit up in the North Louisiana, Shreveport, the Fourth and Fifth Circuit down around New Orleans, and so sometimes those judges and the parishes that are under them will decide a case that's factually the same as one we decide, but they'll go a different direction. So if the First Circuit is saying, we think this is the law, and the Fourth Circuit thinks that's the law, and the Third Circuit thinks that's the law, the Supreme Court has to step in for uniformity and say, okay, here's what the law is on that particular area.
And so folks understand, when the Supreme Court says this is what it means, that's what it means. There's no one else deciding it.
No.
And the appellate court, the 5 appellate courts below them have to rule that way, and all those trial courts have to rule that way.
Rule that way until and unless changed by the Constitution of the legislature.
One of the other criteria is that the Supreme Court determines that it's an issue for policy reasons that they need to make a pronouncement on, that they need to decide, because it's an important issue for the court system or the state itself. Explain to the folks.
Sometimes issues come forth that are unclear, and the Louisiana Supreme Court will have to make a pronouncement on that. And so the court looks at how important is this decision going to be to how important is it going to be, and how important is it that we go ahead and weigh in on this issue and make a decision.
In advance, almost.
And so that's another criteria. Another one is whether or not this Court of Appeal just blew it. They just got the law so wrong that we've got to fix this. Another one could be that the procedure that was employed was just wrong. And the Supreme Court steps in and says, this is just egregious and wrong, and we're going to take this case and fix it.
And then there's the rare occasion, but it has happened, both at the United States Supreme Court and, of course, here in Louisiana, that the Supreme Court may decide that a previous decision that set precedent is not what they want to be the precedent. They want to change it or modify it or tweak it. Explain to the folks how that happens.
Well, that could be where a case has been determined. For example, a decision about the Constitution. The Supreme Court's interpreted the Constitution to say one thing, and then comes back and changes its mind and says it's another thing. And this is how important this election is. Gambling in Louisiana was the result of a decision by the Louisiana Supreme Court that called gambling was prohibited by the Constitution. So that was allowed, gambling was allowed because they changed it and rephrased it to gaming.
Unbelievable.
They had a court not long ago in New York that says poker is not gambling or gaming, it's a game of skill, like tennis. I mean, so that's how important the Louisiana Supreme Court can be. A decision can affect and change lives.
It can change the whole government.
It can change everything.
Let's explain to the folks too, because there's 7 justices, but a majority decides whether or not they're going to accept a writ, that is, go ahead and listen to an appeal. So that would be 4 out of the 3, and a decision is made based on majority. Explain to the folks how it would work, because really what you're saying is in my understanding is we kind of got 3 folks that are more conservative justices. We got 3 folks who are more liberal justices, and whoever is elected this time is going to move one way or the other, or kind of be the swing vote, so to speak.
Well, that's what the thinking is. But you know, we've got some people down in New Orleans with some hurt feelings over the Chief Justice selection process.
That's right.
And so that's going to take, I would imagine, some healing and understanding by both sides of that, and a really coming together. So your point, though, and I think it's well taken, is this: it doesn't matter what an individual thinks. If you can't get at least 3 additional votes, it doesn't matter.
Judge, thank you so much. Very much appreciate it. This is Locke Meredith, Legal Lines, First Circuit Court of Appeal. Duke Welch, thank you for being with us.